Celebrating a holiday without John is not something that I look forward to. But sadly, it's something that I'm getting used to. The life of being married to a nurse. Last year, when the 4th of July came along, I was debating on whether to celebrate at home or celebrate out. Out. One out. And early that morning, I loaded our wagon and our camping chairs, all of our food, and my children into the van and headed south for the Freedom Festival. I'd arranged to meet my parents there later in the morning. We left early though because I wanted to experience the balloon festival. I remember going to balloon festivals when I was a kid and I loved it. I really wanted my kids to experience that as well. When we got to Provo and the balloon field, it looked rather daunting. There was no grass to be seen, only people. And I realized the ratio, the parent-child ratio, was not in my favor, 4-to-1. I strapped Eli onto me with my wrap, so I guess I don't have to count him. 1, 2, 3 to 1. As I got the kids out of the car, I made them promise to not let go of anyone's hand and stay together. We headed towards the balloon field. I felt like we were fish going upstream because everyone seemed to be going the other direction. When we got to the balloon field, most of the balloons were already in the air. But all we had to do was look up to see the magic. There were all those colorful balls, and we could hear the of the flames bursting on and off, lifting the balloons higher and higher. I wanted to make sure that my children caught the magic. Look, there's the Coca-Cola bottle. And look over there, there's the piggy bank. If you look over the mountains, you can see a red, white, and blue balloon. We all took turns pointing out our favorite balloons in the air, and periodically I would look down and count. 1, 2, 3, 4. We were all there. When we were done, we made it back to the car, and I was feeling like a very accomplished mother to have made it through the crowd and back to the car, safe and sound. Next, we headed to the parade route. The Provo Freedom Festival parade is a big deal. People camp out on the parking strip overnight to get the best front row seats. I knew that our chances of getting any seat, let alone a good seat, were slim, but we were going to try. Once again, I got everybody out of the car, got the wagon out, put our camping chairs and our food in the wagon, and before we started our trek, again, I said, "You must promise to not let go of anyone's hand." And we began our trek. We made it to University Avenue where the parade makes its parade, and we headed south, always looking from one side of the street to the other side of the street, trying to find some little scrap of ground that we could put our things down. We walked 1 block, 2 blocks, and I was beginning to think that perhaps this has not been the best idea. And then, as if a heavenly hand had been placed there, I found a little spot. It was a front row spot. It was empty. I asked the parties on either side, "Is this spot free? Can we use this space right here?" And I was right. It had been saved just for us. We put out our chairs, and before too long, my parents arrived riding on their bikes. We put their bikes out of the way and got ready to enjoy a great parade. I loved watching my youngest, Eli's, eyes as he enjoyed his first 4th of July parade. They sparkled as the clowns walked past, honking their horns. My children will give the parade a thumbs down if you ask them. for the lack of candy, but I saw their eyes when those floats went flying by. After the parade was over, we were ready to head to the festival itself. We met my parents there, they rode their bikes, and before we went perusing, we had to do a potty break. It was a good time of day to do it because the porta potties hadn't been used by very many people and they were relatively clean. After that ordeal was over, I just really hoped that we didn't have to visit them again. I was enjoying the ratio then because we were 3 on 3. This looked good. We started perusing some of the booths, and if the booth had candy, then the children were quiet for a few moments. But if the booth didn't have candy, they began their chattering and their begging and their pleading. Mom, I want to go over there. Mom, I want to go over there. Mom, I'm hungry and I want to go over there. I could not be everywhere at once, so before too long, their pleading won out. We decided to head over to the children's area. On our way, we passed the people that were selling the potato curly fried goodness, and our noses let us know that we were definitely going to need some of those before the day was out. When we got to the children's area, there were so many different activities to do. They had tables that were set out with paper and pens and markers and crayons and stickers so that you could write letters to soldiers overseas. The Boy Scouts had a huge area roped off where they were doing woodworking and leatherworking and wood burning and beading. They had a big stage with a big audience area. There was a huge craft area with every kind of craft thing possible, every kind of little foamy sticker and glitter and glue and even fingernail polish. And there was a reptile show that was going to start before too long. And there in the middle of it all were the coveted, all-powerful bounce houses. My children loved bounce houses. They didn't get to play on them very often though because I didn't let them unless it was either really inexpensive or free. To my children, this area was Disneyland. And to me, it was better than Disneyland because it was all free. It was going to be a good afternoon. We decided that we were going to split up. My mom was going to get some food for everybody. I was going to go and write my letter to a soldier that I didn't get to write while I was helping all of my children with theirs. And my dad was going to stay there and watch the kids as they bounced on the bounce houses. Right before I left, the reptile show started. And so my girls decided to go watch the reptile show. I sat them down, got them situated, showed them where their papa was, and went to go write my letter. What I didn't realize is that I was changing the ratio. I wrote my letter, and I was feeling very patriotic on such a patriotic day. And then I went back to find my dad and relieve him. He was standing there watching Collier bouncing up and down, head banging into the wall, flipping over. It looked like he was going to break his neck any moment, but he didn't. Then I went to check on my girls, watching the reptile show. I positioned myself so that I could see the whole audience, and there was Audrey front and center with her eyes bugging out of her head as this huge iguana walked in front of her. And then I looked for Nora. But she wasn't where I left her. I looked in the area all around, and I still didn't see her. I tried to make her little brown head appear amongst all the others. And then I began going from face to face, scanning the crowd, trying to make her eyes appear amongst them somewhere. But they didn't. So I went to ask my dad, Dad, have you seen Nora? Because she's not watching the reptile show. His countenance changed. I haven't seen her. We knew that it was time to start looking for her. I headed over to this big truck. The whole back of it was full of sand and sand toys. There was a dad playing there with his son, and I asked, "Have you seen my daughter? She was excited to come and play here, and she's about this tall, she has glasses, an orange t-shirt. Has she been playing here?" He shook his head. "Sorry." So I went to keep looking somewhere else. I know that Nora hadn't been lost for very long, but to me, a mother who had no idea where her daughter was, it seemed like a really long time. I pictured her sitting under a tree somewhere, crying. I wondered if someone was going to find her that would help her find me. I wondered if someone was going to find her that wouldn't help her find me, who wouldn't be kind to her at all. And even though I told myself that this really probably wasn't the truth, it was hard to wipe those thoughts out of my mind if I had no proof otherwise. So I kept looking and walking. And as I walked, my hand felt empty. Nora always said, "Mom, I want to hold your hand." Everywhere I walked, I had Nora's hand in mine. And I could tell that her hand wasn't where it belonged. Rawia reached up and grabbed her mother's hand. It felt like it was right where it belonged. Mother looked down. She loved when Rawia held her hand. They walked like this every morning as they walked through the marketplace gathering their supplies for the day. And that morning, Rawia heard the drum beat, but she didn't know where it came from until they rounded the corner. And there stood the Zimwe. Rawia tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Mother looked down. "Don't worry. He's not going to eat you today." Rawia smiled at her mother, but she had heard the stories of the Zimwe and of the children that he had eaten. She felt much better once they had passed this creature and began their walk down the path home. And while they walked, Rawia did what she did every morning. She told her mother a story. Once, there was this village, and the village knew that the Zimwe was close by. So, every night, the mothers and fathers, they would hide their children behind a curtain so that the Zimwe couldn't get to the children. The whole way home, Mother listened as Rawia's story unfolded, and she smiled because she knew that this was Rawia's way of dealing with her fears. Once they got home, there was so much to be done. Breakfast to care for, the bread for the day to start, and other meals to plan. And today was to be a special day. Rawia had been to the ocean before, but on this day, Mother and Father had decided that she was old enough to go without them. She was to make her way to the boat, to the beach, with just her sister. It was to be her maiden voyage. As they sat and ate their mush at breakfast, Mother spoke to Big Sister. "Now you mustn't walk too fast because you want to make sure that Rawia can keep up with you. And you probably should hold her hand because I don't want you to lose sight of her. And when you get to the beach, make sure that Rawia doesn't go too far out into the ocean because I know that you're all good swimmers, but I want you to be very, very careful. So don't let her go out too far. And make sure that you're watching the sun because I want you to make sure that you're home before dinner. I don't want to have to worry about..." Sister rolled her eyes. "Mother, don't you think that she should just wait a few more weeks at least? I can be much faster on my own, and you really will just sit here worrying all day long." But it had already been decided. Mother readied her daughters, and she watched as they walked down the path towards the ocean. She was surprised at how grown up Rawia looked, walking next to her big sister. As they disappeared over the hill, Mother went back into the hut to busy herself as she waited for her daughters to return. As they walked, Rawia made sure that Big Sister wouldn't mind her being along. For every one of Sister's steps, Rawia took two, and she skipped and she sang the whole way. As they neared the ocean, they could hear the waves. There was one dune left to cross. They kicked off their sandals, ran up the hot sand. Once they got to the top, there was Rawia's favorite view, ocean, as far as she could see. They ran down the other side of the dune, gravity pulling them as they tried not to tumble. Once they got to the bottom, Rawia walked out and started dancing back and forth with the tide as it went in and out. She couldn't wait too long, though, before putting her feet in the water. The cool water felt so good as the hot sun beat down on her shoulders. She walked out, the water touched her ankles, and then up to her knees, and then her thighs. It felt so refreshing. She could look out into the ocean and see where the waves capped and rolled white all the way until they reached her. As she looked down and saw an object in the water, she picked up a huge conch shell, a gift from the waves. She put it to her ear, and she could hear the ocean as she felt the ocean on her legs. She scooped the water up into the conch shell and made her own waterfall. She played that way for a while Sister gathered shells on the beach. And when she tired, she too went to the beach. She found a rock, sat down, and continued to play with her special gift. She even made up a song about it. Falling, crashing, tumbling waves gave this shell to me. Spinning, twisting, turning shell, color of the sundown sky. Hiding, holding, playing shell, in it I hear the sea, in it I hear the sea. The day passed splendidly as the sun crawled across the sky. Finally, Sister looked up, saw where the sun stood, and called, "It's time for us to head home. If we don't leave now, we won't make it in time for dinner." And the girls began climbing back up the dune, down the other side. They put their sandals on and started walking down the path home. Rawia looked down at her empty hands. "My shell, I forgot my shell. We have to go back and get it." Big Sister said, "Oh, no, we can't go back. You heard Mother. She said we can't be late for supper. Your shell will be there next week when we come." "Oh, no. It was a gift from the waves, and I wanted to show it to Mother and Father. Please, we have to go back." Rawia's eyes were so big. Finally, Sister said, "All right, you run back to the beach, but I'm going to keep walking slowly, so you have to catch up, and that way we will be sure we won't be late for supper, so you had better hurry." Rawia ran back to the beach, and when she got there was her shell right where she had left it on the rock. And next to the shell sat the Zimwe. Cautiously, Rawia walked forward. "That's my shell. I would really like to have my shell, please." "What? I can't hear you." So she spoke louder. "My shell, that's my shell. I would really like to have it, please." "Oh, your shell. You want your shell? Of course. You just have to sing me that little song that you were singing." So Rawia began. "Falling, crashing, tumbling waves gave this shell to me." "Come closer, I can't quite hear you." A step. "Twisting, turning, spinning shell, color of the sundown sky." "Just a little bit closer, I can't quite hear you." clear the sea, and she reached out, grabbed onto that shell, but the Zimwe grabbed onto her arm. Next to the Zimwe sat his drum. He took his drum, removed the lid, and stuffed Rawia and her shell down into the drum before replacing it. Look what I have now, a magic singing drum. Oh, it will make me rich. When I beat my drum, you will sing that song every time. The Zimwe headed down the beach the opposite direction to the nearest village. A sister was walking home slowly. As she neared the hut, she kept looking over her shoulder, expecting Rawia to run up behind her any time. When their hut came into view, Mother came running out. How was the ocean? How did Rawia like the beach? Where is Rawia? Sister had to explain. She ran back to the beach to get this shell that she said she had to have, and she's right behind me. I'm sure that she'll be here any moment. Mother was furious. You left your sister at the beach? You were supposed to stay with her. Without another word, Mother ran to get Father, and they began looking for their daughter. There was no sleep for them that night. When morning came, Father gathered all of the men from their village to start searching for Rawia, and Mother and Father went from village to village, asking everyone they saw, have you seen our daughter by chance? She's about this tall, and she has short brown hair. She has a beautiful voice, and she was all alone. Have you seen her? But always the answer was no. And while Mother and Father were going from village to village, the Zimwe was also going from village to village. That first morning, he made his way to a marketplace, and when it was bustling with people, he called out, Come and listen to my singing drum. You will like what you hear. And then the crowd erupted with stamping at their feet, clapping their hands and shouting. They thought he was amazing. Before long, they started bringing offerings of food, beans and fruit and yams. And the Zimwe's belly was full for the first time in a long time. It was the same in every village. Everyone brought him offerings, and some even brought coins. Rawia, she only saw scraps late at night when the Zimwe was sure no one was watching to see him lift the lid of his drum. He went from town to town, and Mother and Father went from village to village, always asking, Have you seen our daughter? She's about this tall. And always the answer was no. Until one morning, Mother and Father and the Zimwe found themselves in the same village. The marketplace was a bustle, and they heard the Zimwe call out, Come and listen to my magic singing drum. She turned to Father. our daughter in that drum. We must devise a plan so that we can rescue her without causing her any harm. They set about their plan. When the Zimwe was done with his performance, they went up to him and Father said, "Kind sir, will you please come and be our honored guest at our tent? Let us make you a feast." "Well, all right." The Zimwe followed them to their tent. Mother began preparing food. Her hands shook as she formed the bread. And then she presented the food to the Zimwe. And what he ate, she refilled and gave him more until the Zimwe had eaten so much there was nothing for him to do but close his eyes and sleep. When they were sure that the Zimwe was asleep, Father took the drum. He removed the lid. Mother looked inside, and there was such a gaunt, red, puffy face. But the eyes were Rawia's. They lifted their daughter out of the drum and held her, never wanting to let her go. But they had to because Rawia had to eat. This time, Mother prepared the food with joy. She was cooking for her daughter. When the Zimwe woke up, he could not see Rawia, and he did not know that while he slept, Father had taken that drum. He'd placed stones inside the drum so that it felt just like it did when Rawia was inside, and then cautiously, carefully, he placed in it a deadly poisonous snake before replacing the lid. Mother asked him, "Will you play for us one more time before you are on your way?" "Of course I will." "Perhaps you will have to wait until my next visit to hear my singing drum." The Zimwe made his way into the forest, there to face the fate that awaited him. Father and Mother and Rawia, they turned to the path that led home. And Mother reached out her hand. Rawia took it, and it felt like that's where it belonged. Nora's hand belonged in mine, but it still wasn't there. As I continued to walk around the festival, my insides were turning inside out. The people that I passed, they were laughing and smiling and happy. It was unfathomable for me to understand how anyone could be happy when my daughter was missing. Every time I circled around and met my dad, I didn't have to ask him. I could tell that he hadn't found Nora just by the look in his eye. She wasn't at the craft table. She wasn't in the Boy Scout area. I couldn't find her in the audience watching the dancing on the stage. I circled back around and headed back the other way. As I walked, the audience was facing me, watching what was going on stage. The sound tech caught my eye. As a performer, the sound guy is important. And I always noticed the sound tech wherever I went. There he was doing his job. And that's when I noticed the chair behind him. I could see some legs and feet dangling on the chair behind him. Then I realized that I recognized those feet. As I walked farther, Nora came into view, her back. I thought when she turned I would see this red, puffy face with tears running down her cheeks. But she just turned and said, "Hi, Mom!" The lady next to her explained that they found her wandering around, looking for me. they'd made announcements over the loudspeaker, but I had never been close enough to a loudspeaker to hear that announcement. But it didn't matter because there was Nora. I lifted her out of the sound booth and we walked back together to where I knew my family was waiting. As we walked, I reached out my hand and Nora put her hand in mine, and it felt like it was right where it